The judge's decision came quickly. The evidence is clear. The defendant acted deliberately and without remorse. This court finds Jessica guilty of larceny. Jessica was sentenced to a year in jail and ordered to pay back the full $115,000 plus court costs. Her expression went from smugged to stunned as the verdict sank in. As I was leaving the courthouse, Kay approached me. "She's your sister. You could have handled this differently," he said. "So could she." I replied and walked away. Justice had been served, but it came at a high price. The aftermath of the trial was immediate and messy. Jessica's conviction sent shockwaves through the family, and everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some relatives called to support me, saying I'd done the right thing. She deserved it, said my cousin Lisa. If she thought she could get away with it, she needs a reality check. Theirs weren't so kind. My aunt practically scolded me over the phone. "You didn't have to put her in jail. She's your sister, couldn't you have? Just let her pay you back over time." What time? I shot back. She never planned on paying me back, and conversations with my parents were the most difficult. Mom called almost every day, torn between anger at Jessica and guilt over the situation. "She's your sister." She kept saying she made a mistake, but it will stay with her forever. She'll learn from this, I replied. She had plenty of chances to make it right, and she didn't. Dad didn't say much, but I could tell he was disappointed in Jessica for what she'd done, and maybe in me for letting it get this far. He muttered things like this: "Family will never be the same," and then changed the subject. Jessica herself didn't reach out. She made her position clear when she called me a burden at that dinner. And after the trial, she wasn't exactly in a position to talk for. The first time in a long time, I felt a strange calm. My money would eventually be returned through the restitution order, and Jessica would finally face the consequences of her actions. But it came at a price. The family was torn apart, and it didn't seem like things would ever be the same again. Part of me wondered if Jessica would ever truly understand why I did what I did, or if she'd just spend the next year resenting me even more. The months following Jessica's conviction were anything but peaceful. My parents were caught in the middle, desperately trying to salvage the family dynamic, but it was like trying to put shattered glass back together. Mom called me almost every week, alternating between guilt and frustration. "She's in jail and she's paying back the money," she said one night. "Isn't that enough for you? Can't we start to heal?" "She stole from me, Mom," I replied. "And not just money. She stole my trust. I'll consider forgiveness when I see real remorse." Dade, on the other hand, avoided the subject entirely whenever I visited their home. He kept the conversation short and neutral. Once, as I was leaving, he muttered, "This family will never be the same." I didn't respond, but his words stayed with me. Kay was nowhere to be seen after Jessica went to prison. I didn't ask what happened between them, but I suspected that the stress of the trial and its aftermath had been too much for him. The extended family wasn't shy about sharing their opinions, though. At one barbecue, Mom insisted on hosting. Uncle Jim cornered me near the grill. "Look, I understand why you're upset, but she's your sister. Family fights, sure. But jail, come on, that's too far. She didn't just fight with me." I shot back, "She stole $115,000. If she wasn't my sister, no one would question that. Why does being family make it okay?" "It's not okay," he admitted, "but this could have been handled privately. You didn't have to drag her through the courts privately." I escaped incredulously. "I gave her a chance, Jim. She didn't care. She called me a burden. For God's sake." He sighed and shook his head. "I just hope it was worth it." Conversations like this happened often. Some relatives avoided the subject altogether, but I could feel their judgment. Others quietly supported me, saying Jessica had crossed a line and needed to learn her lesson. "She's always been entitled," my cousin Lisa said during one of our conversations. "You did the right thing." Even if nobody wants to admit it, the worst part was how alone I felt. I'd have fought to get my money back and protect myself, but I torn the family apart in the process. Jessica hadn't just stolen money, she had stolen the peace we once had as a family. I didn't hate her, thought. That was the strange part. I was angry, sure, but there were moments when I remembered the sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd sneak me extra cookies when we were kids, or cover for me when I broke something. Those memories made it harder, not easier. Still, every time I wavered, I remembered that dinner, her smug admission, the way she dismissed my hard work, and the audacity to call me a burden she'd burn. The bridge, not me. Mom kept urging me to visit her in prison. "Maybe if the two of you just talked," She said one day, her voice trailing off, "I'll think about it, Iliad," knowing I wasn't ready. The family wasn't the same, and I didn't know if it ever would be. But one thing was clear. I'd drawn my line, and for once, I wasn't Theon. Crossing it, months passed, and the tension in the family showed no signs. Ophobating Jessica served her time, and I slowly got my life back on track. Their restitution payments began to come in small increments each when a cold reminder of how far things had gone. Then, one day out of the blue, I received a letter from Jessica. Stared at the envelope for a long time before opening. Her handwriting, usually neat and bold, was shaky. "Evan," it began. "I've had a lot of time to think about this. I know. You probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. I didn't just steal your money. I betrayed you, and I made things worse by doubling down. Instead of admitting it, you didn't deserve any of this." I stopped reading for a moment, trying to process the unexpected sincerity. She continued, "I was angry at you, but mostly because it was easier than admitting I was wrong sitting here. I can't pretend anymore. You were right to stand up for yourself. I was selfish, and I hurt you. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I had to say it." I read the letter twice, then folded it and set it aside. Her words felt genuine, but I didn't know what to do with them. A week later, Mom called. "Jessica wants to see you," she said carefully. "She says it's important." "I don't know, Mom," I replied. "What is there to say? Maybe it's not about saying anything." She said quietly. After a few days of wrestling with myself, I decided to go, not for her, but for me. I needed to know if her apology was real or just another manipulation. When I arrived at the visiting area of the prison, Jessica looked different. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by a weariness I'd never seen before. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I sat down, not sure how to begin. She spoke first. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to see you. I needed to tell you face to face that I'm sorry for everything." Her voice broke as she continued, "When I took your money, I thought it was the only way out, but it wasn't about surviving. It was about me being too proud to admit I screwed up, and when you confronted me, I lashed out because I hated myself for what I'd done." I didn't interrupt, letting her get it all out. "I know I can't undo the damage," she finally said, "but I want to make things right. No matter how long it takes, I just hope that one day you can see me as your sister again." For the first time in a long time, I saw a glimpse of the Jessica I used to know, the one who cared, who could admit when she was wrong. "I don't hate you," I said after a long pause, "but it's going to take time. A lot of it. This didn't just break my trust, it broke the family." "I know," she said. "I'll work to fix it, I promise." I left that day feeling lighter, though far from healed. Her apology didn't erase what she'd done, but it was a start. The road to forgiveness wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt like it was possible. Jessica still had a long way to go, but at least she was taking the first steps, and that was enough for me. Sister called me a burden to our family after she stole my money to get out of a financial hole, so I forced her to return the money and filed a lawsuit against her. Family dinners at my parents' house were always a chaotic mix of opinions, laughter, and the occasional tension. That Sunday, the air felt heavier than usual, but I chalked it up to nothing more than my own discomfort. My sister Jessica sat across the table, uncharacteristically quiet, her boyfriend Kyle by her side. Jessica had always been the more outspoken one, so her subdued demeanor was a rare sight. I noticed that she'd recently gotten a new phone, top of the line, better than anything I could afford. It struck me as odd, since she'd been complaining about financial difficulties just a few weeks ago. I had no idea that this dinner would turn into a public spectacle. We were halfway through the meal when Kyle, oblivious to the undercurrents, casually asked, "Hey Hassan, you unseen Jessica's old cell phone? She won't shut up about this new Unforgettable." Fell silent. "Forks floating in there." Jessica looked up, her face instantly flushed. I felt my stomach twist. Instinct. I guess she laughed a little too, casually, and said, "Oh yeah, it's gone. I got rid of it, had to upgrade. You know?" Mom raised an eyebrow. "Thought you were broke." Jessica shrugged. "It's taken care of now. Things are better. C wasn't done. Wait, wasn't it? Just last week that you said you were drowning in debt. What changed?" Jessica's face hardened. She looked right at me and said, "Well, I found a solution." It took me a second to process the sharpness of her tone. "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my chest. She smiled like it was all a joke. "I mean, you didn't use some money in your savings account, did you? That car you're saving for Can wait the room, froze my money, my savings 115. IID worked overtime for every penny of it earmarked for my dream car. What are you talking about? I demanded. My voice wasn't loud, but I could feel the tension radiating from me. Jessica rolled here. Yes, as if I was the unreasonable one. Look, it's not. A big deal. I took care of it. You should have helped me when I asked, but no, you couldn't spare anything. So I borrowed it, call it family redistribution or whatever. You'll survive, I could barely think. Mom gasped, and Dad mumbled something under his breath. Kyle looked horrified, like he wanted to sink into his chair. I stared at Jessica, trying to comprehend her audacity. You stole $150. 000 from me and you think it's no big deal? She didn't even flinch. You're always whining about how hard you work, but you don't even contribute to the family. You're just a burden. The words hit me like a slap, but the anger boiling inside me kept me calm. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not this time. And that's how it all started. The room erupted into chaos. My mom started screaming. My dad demanded that Jessica explain herself, and Kyle just stared at this plate, probably wishing he was somewhere else. Meanwhile, I sat there, fists clenched, staring at Jessica like I didn't even know who she was. She didn't even look sorry, if anything. She looked annoyed, like we were making too big a deal out of her stealing 15 grand. I could feel my blood boiling. But I kept my voice calm when I spoke again. You stole my money to pay off your debts and buy a new phone, seriously. Jessica shrugged like it was